You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters, with thanks to Wexford Insurances. Wexford Insurances. More information at wexfordinsurance.com. I'm now joined by Dr. Sean Mythen, who would be very well known to many of our listeners, having served as both President of Wexford Chamber and as CEO of Wexford County Enterprise Board for a period of 15 years. Sean, prior to the Enterprise Board, what were you doing?
I started off in 1970 with Wexford County Council, and I spent 24 years there. I was in various departments in the County Council, including HR, roads, motor tax, planning, tourism. I was around almost every department of the County Council in my day.
I know in 1970, back then there was household charges and they were done away with in 1978. What are your thoughts on that?
To me, it led to a weakening of the whole local authority system. And I think we're suffering for it still, really. I think any democracy needs good local authorities. And I think the whole system of local government in this country has been eroded to a great extent.
So you welcome the reintroduction of domestic household charges?
Look, I'm not saying that specifically. What I am saying is that there needs to be a much better base for the financing of local authorities. Local authorities need to be more autonomous. They're very much part of the local democratic system. But as I say, they have been very much weakened because they don't have really their own financial base, if you like.
So what you're saying is that up to 1978, they had their own autonomy because they were generating their own income to balance their own budgets from both commercial and domestic rates. In 1978, they lost the domestic rates aspect and they were then more reliant on state funding.
Yeah, and it's a case of he who pays the piper calls the tune, if you like. And what has happened to local authorities is that to my mind, have been very much under the thumb of central government. And there has been this reluctance, to give them the independence that they really need. As I say, in any good, healthy democracy, you need good local representatives and all of that. And just how local authorities are funded in this country, it means that the central government have a huge say in what goes on, in how services are delivered, in what gets delivered. And it has become very much the remit of central government to dole favours out, if you like. And that's not the way it should be done.
If, let's say, for instance, that the local authorities were in a position to fund themselves through domestic and commercial charges, what difference do you think it would make to the county?
One of the reasons that we're seeing such reluctance to pay this €100 is I think there are two reasons. I think one is it's seen as the thin end of the wedge, if you like, in that this is only the start of something that's going to increase and increase and increase. And the other is that people can't relate it to what is actually being provided. There's a large suite of programs that the local authority does provide. This is just €100 charge that goes, and as far as people are concerned, it goes into a big, mass of funding that goes up to central government, and they'll dole it out as and when and how that they see fit. And I think if people are paying taxes, then they have to know what those taxes are for, what they're being spent on, what value for money is being got, and so on, particularly in the times that are in it.
Is that not a communication issue for the local authority?
It's a communication for central government and local authorities, the communication issue. I think part of the weakness of local authorities, or why we've come to the stage that we're in, is local authorities haven't been prepared sufficiently to stand up for themselves and to demand what we are entitled to as a system of local government. And I would have seen that over the years, over the 24 years that I was involved with county councils.
The commercial rates is a very hot topic in this county and has been now for the last number of years due to its inequitable status. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're dead right. I think the whole system of rates as it now applies in this country is inequitable. And I'm not going to go into there have been numerous reports which have pointed that out. Some of the best tax brains in the country have looked at the rating system. And it is inequitable. And what happened when the domestic rates were abolished in 1978 is the burden of rates fell on commercial properties. It was taken off of farming as well, and that's for a different reason. But what happened then is the only people who were left paying rates were the commercial premises. That's one aspect of it. Added to that, then, you had a very unfair system of valuation. There's a new Valuation Act now and so on, and all of the commercial premises were supposed to be revalued within 5 years. There's not a hope in hell of that happening. And so you have a lot of inequities around the place where, a very similar premises might be way overvalued or valued differently, at least, to, a premises in the same vicinity. And all that means that somebody in a similar business is paying way more rates than the fellow down the road or whatever. And it's absolutely understandable why people should be fairly fed up with a system like that.
I know in 1994 the local authority was involved in setting up the local county enterprise board, and you were appointed as the first CEO to that board. How did that come about?
There was a decision to have a system of 35 enterprise boards. The first enterprise board on a pilot basis was actually in Galway. It wasn't a decision of the bureaucrats within government or within the civil service, I should say. It was actually a decision of Albert Reynolds, and he was a businessman and understood business and understood the needs of business and understood that, giving small incentives, grant aid training and all of that to small business had the potential to make a huge difference. And he was dead right. And the local authorities at the time, assisted the enterprise boards in setting up.
From the very beginning, what was the role of the enterprise board back then?
The role of the enterprise board back then was primarily to help get jobs created. I remember when I started off in Wexford County Enterprise Board, I had £1 million, not euros, pounds to give out the first year. And over, I suppose, the last 15 to 18 years, the Enterprise Board in Wexford has given out about around 10 million by way of grant aid. And to me, that has made a huge difference. I suppose what people don't realise, if you put 10, 15,000 into a business, the government gets it back in exchequer funding through VAT, through, tax, PRSI, PAYE and so on. And to me, it was never more necessary than it is now. The enterprise boards were created in the early 90s, when we were just beginning to turn the corner from a recession from the 80s. And in that respect, they were hugely successful in encouraging local business, in helping create new jobs or helping business to create the jobs.
That leads us to the present situation regarding county enterprise boards, where they're going to be amalgamated into local authorities. Is this a retrograde step, Sean?
Well, I suppose I can speak a bit more freely about my opinions now that I'm no longer employed directly by either a state authority or whatever. And yeah, to me, look, I think it's a retrograde step. And I'll tell you why, actually. Because the local authority is a big organisation. And the local authority, to a great extent, is an enforcing authority. What was most successful about the enterprise boards is that their independence. And they weren't subject to political interference. They did their job that they were supposed to do without fear or favour. And they assisted in the creation, in my time certainly, of about 1,600 jobs in the county. And that's the equivalent to 4 or 5 multinational companies, in the county. And because it happened gradually, and a few jobs here, a few jobs there, there was no great foo-fa about it, or no great announcements and so on. But they were very efficient in what they do, and continue to be very efficient. I think putting them back into the local authority sends the wrong signals. I think the local authority has so many problems of its own. It's when the local authorities, when the first Planning Act came in 1963, long before your time, Karl. But local authorities were supposed to be development corporations. They were supposed to facilitate, huge development. They never became development corporations. They became enforcing authorities. And I think it sends the wrong signal putting enterprise boards back into the local authority system.
Sean, I see that the enterprise boards now, more so than ever, have an interest in supporting businesses with international potential. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that, to be honest. And I'll tell you why. there's an economic theory which has gotten hold of government policy, if you like, that a business has to be exporting before you can grant aid it. And that to me is only part of the story. And the reason the economists give is this thing of displacement. If you grant aid a small business and it's a local business, that it will displace another business. Look, Ireland is a small place. You grant aid anyone and there's a potential for displacement anyhow. I don't care whether they're exporting or not. And it's just, this idea has taken hold, has been pushed by economists and so on. And what has happened then is, the likes of the Enterprise Board are no longer in favour with the government for, to give grant aid to small business. And I think if ever, they were needed, is right now to help small businesses, sustain themselves, keep going. Even grant aiding one job can make a huge difference. I think there needs to be a rethink of all of that.
Just to give you some stats in relation to the current business climate, there's 200,000 businesses in Ireland. Less than 3,000 of those are clients of Enterprise Ireland, and less than 1,000 of those businesses are actually active in exporting. So the writing is on the wall for the government. They have those stats as well as I have them. Why do you think they're so focused on the export market?
I take your point, about Enterprise Ireland. To me, Enterprise Ireland have, to some extent, painted themselves into a corner, if you like, that they've been so particular about what they will grant aid and what they won't grant aid. Effectively, Enterprise Ireland in this country are working with 900 businesses. If exporting businesses and the expansion of good businesses in IT sector and green energy and whatever it is, if they're to be the great white hope of saving this country, we've got to do an awful lot better than that. And I think the enterprise boards have a huge role to play. And the expertise that has been built up over the last 18 years within every county, within the 35 enterprise boards, what they know about business, the relationships they've created, the problems that they've helped solve. And I think just putting them back into the local authority, I think you'll lose a lot of that.
What's the future for the enterprise board on the basis that back in your day, Sean, you started off with £1 million budget per year? I know I spoke to this acting CEO of Wexford County Enterprise Board recently, and he confirmed that he has less than €250,000 to spend on grant aiding businesses this year.
If they're there, finance them, let them do the job properly instead of this willy-nilly stuff. I'll give you an example of that. They've decided to put the enterprise boards into the local authority, but they haven't said how, when, how it will work. They're supposed to have a relationship with Enterprise Ireland and all of that. None of that has been thought out properly. So it's one of these kind of, I won't say snap decisions, it's one of these things that has been discussed for ages, and they finally made a decision that they're going into the local authority. But it's typical of the malaise that's going on at national level at the moment, that these things are not sufficiently thought out.
I know that you left the Enterprise Board in 2009, took early retirement, and you set up Adsum Training. Where did the idea for that business come?
I suppose I always intended working for myself. I never intended to retire and go out into the blue yonder straight from the enterprise board. I wanted to do something for myself. I had learned a lot of skills, in dealing with businesses in Wexford over the years. In 15 years of the enterprise board, I spent 6 years with the chamber and 2 years as president of the chamber, and indeed a bit of time on the board on the national board of Chambers Ireland. And I was pretty familiar with the needs, or am pretty familiar with the needs of small business, and I wanted to do something in that space. So, I help businesses still, not totally different than what I was doing with the Enterprise Board, and helping them with business plans and helping, looking at their business from A to a Z, seeing what can be improved, what needs to be dropped, new opportunities. And one of the things, that I learned from my time, both in the Enterprise Board and in the Chamber, was this whole process of networking, and that's what we're encouraging in Ferns in this new initiative that we set up.
Sean, you set Adsum Training up in 2009 at the height of the recession. I suppose you were coming from the perspective of one day sitting behind the desk as a public servant, and the following day then out there in the big bad world yourself in business. Was it an eye-opener for you?
I'd have to say it was an absolute eye-opener. And, you're working in a protected environment in the public service to a great extent. Once you step outside the door, one, you've got to do everything for yourself. And secondly, you don't get paid unless you produce something that's of use to someone pretty immediately that they're prepared to pay you for. So you've got to, you become very commercially minded very, very quickly. And you get to recognise what people want. And a lot of the time what I do, people want what I do, but because I'm dealing with a lot of small businesses who are particularly strapped for funds at the moment, it's quite difficult, to make a business out of getting paid for providing services that they need, but, can't necessarily pay for it.
After spending 15 years at the helm of the enterprise board, you had one perception of business. How did that change when you became self-employed?
I've a lot more sympathy for businesses now, I can tell you. When I see the personal dedication and the efforts that people put into keeping businesses going, the sacrifices that they make. And, it has to be recognised it's a lifestyle choice in running your own business. For some people, it's not a choice because they have no other alternative. But a lot of people don't necessarily make good money from running a small business, particularly in the times that are in it. But they're particularly creative, they're dedicated, and they have my total admiration, from what I've seen of businesses out there.
I know you're also currently chairman of the Ferns Development Association, and you're involved in a new initiative called Ferns Active Businesses. Tell me a bit about that, Sean.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was really driven by businesses themselves who had a meeting in the courtyard in Ferns and said, look, is there anything we can do for ourselves? And if there is, what is that something? And I became involved with them then, and I started talking about getting a handle on the number of businesses that are out there, which surprises us. In a small place like Ferns, there are over 160 businesses. And I think I said earlier, one of the attitudes of the Celtic Tiger was kind of every man for himself. And in effect, in business, that doesn't work because we all depend on each other for services. We all depend on each other. We're all interlinked, if you like. And one of the things that we're, discussing with the small group, we've about 40 businesses involved now. Now, whether they'll stay involved or not is another question. But it's an interesting example of the business community at local level coming together, seeing what they can do for each other. As I say, one of the skills that I learned early on with the Enterprise Board and the Chamber and that is the whole process of networking. You talk to people, you let them know what you're doing, and oftentimes the opportunities don't arise immediately. But all the best business people are good networkers. They're personable, they understand what other businesses are doing, they see what they can add to the pot. So it's an interesting initiative from that perspective. We're at the very early stages, and we have an open meeting on the 4th of April in Ferns, and we've invited your good self to come along and say a few words about networking and all of that. But it's an interesting local initiative, and I think this is where businesses have to go, in helping each other, to help themselves, really.
And what's your ambition for this initiative, John?
It's really to see what can be achieved. We're putting together a database of the businesses, a description of what the businesses are all about. The Ferns Development Association has a good website now where we can profile all the local businesses. And really it's to get businesses working locally for themselves. And you often find within a group of people that they're, whereas you mightn't have all the skills, but within a group of businesses, there are skills which are, people don't even know they have, and they can share those skills and help each other, and working collectively can be far more effective.
And finally, I know that you have a huge involvement in performing arts for a long, long time. How's that going?
Oh God, yeah. I've been known to get up with a guitar and sing a few songs, and I play with a traditional group every Wednesday night in Gorey. And in fact, I have a daughter who's making a living as an actress. In fact, I want to wish her the best of luck because she's starting with the Abbey Theatre.
That's very exciting, Sean. Well, it's been very insightful speaking with you this morning, and I wish you all the best in the future.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters, with thanks to Wexford Insurances. Wexford Insurances. More information at wexfordinsurance.com.